Here is something that should bother every person who has ever counted a calorie. Ancient humans, the ones running across open savanna, climbing trees for honey, digging tubers with wooden sticks, ate constantly when food was available. Not small, disciplined portions. Everything they could find. A hunter-gatherer who stumbles on a fruiting tree doesn't eat a serving size. They eat until the fruit runs out or they can't continue. A successful hunt produces enormous quantities of meat that must be consumed quickly before it spoils, because there is no refrigeration and no way to store it safely. By the logic of modern nutritional thinking, calories in, calories out, portion control, these people should have been obese within a generation. They were not. Skeletal remains from the Upper Paleolithic consistently show lean body compositions, low rates of metabolic disease, and none of the bone pathologies associated with excess body weight. They ate opportunistically, sometimes enormously, and stayed lean. We eat from a global food system that has never in human history produced this much food. We have access to nutritional science they couldn't have imagined, and obesity rates in high-income countries have tripled since 1975. Something is wrong, and it is not the calories, it is the timing. The answer isn't one thing. There are layers here in circadian metabolism, in food composition, in the specific hormonal architecture of eating after movement, and in what happens when the human metabolic system encounters food that never existed before. Each layer moves further from what you've been told. Let's go. Start with the assumption that body weight is primarily determined by the total quantity of calories consumed. This is the foundational model of modern nutritional advice. Eat less, move more, deficit equals weight loss. It is not wrong, but it is radically incomplete because it treats all calories as metabolically equivalent, regardless of when they are consumed, what they are composed of, and what hormonal state the body is in when they arrive. Satchidananda Panda at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies has spent over a decade studying circadian metabolism and published landmark research in cell metabolism in 2012 and subsequent years, showing that the same caloric intake produces dramatically different metabolic outcomes, depending on when it occurs relative to the body's internal clock. Mice fed a high-fat diet within an 8-hour window during their active phase remained lean and metabolically healthy. Mice fed the identical calories in the identical total amount, but spread across 24 hours, became obese, and developed metabolic disease. Same food, same quantity, different timing. The metabolic outcome was determined not by the calories, but by when the cells received them. Here's where it gets strange. Ancient humans were, by the structure of their lives, involuntary practitioners of time-restricted eating. Not because of discipline, because of physics. You cannot eat before you find food. Finding food requires light. Light requires daytime. The period of active food acquisition in a pre-industrial forager group is bounded by sunrise and sunset, typically a window of 10 to 12 hours. Before that window, the body is in a fasted, fat-burning metabolic state. After it closes, food intake ends, and the overnight fast begins. This pattern, eating during the light hours, fasting during the dark hours, aligns food intake precisely with the circadian phase, during which insulin sensitivity is highest, glucose clearance is fastest, and fat oxidation is most efficient. It is not a diet. It is a timing structure imposed by the availability of light. And modern humans, with artificial light extending the eating window to 16 or 18 hours, have broken that structure completely. Walter Longo, at the University of Southern California, who studies fasting biology and longevity, has documented that late-night eating, specifically consuming calories in the hours when circadian metabolism expects a fast, produces disproportionate fat storage, impaired glucose clearance, and elevated triglycerides relative to the same food consumed earlier in the day. Ancient humans didn't avoid eating at night because they knew the science. They avoided it because it was dark and the food was gone. Now, let's tackle food composition, because the other half of the ancient metabolic advantage has nothing to do with timing and everything to do with what the food was made of. Hunter-gatherer diets were extraordinarily high in fiber. Hermann Ponzer at Duke University, who has conducted the most rigorous metabolic studies of contemporary forager groups, published research in Nature in 2012 and Current Biology in 2016, showing that the Hadza of Tanzania consume between 100 and 150 grams of dietary fiber per day, 5 to 7 times the average fiber intake of adults in high-income countries. This is not incidental. Dietary fiber does multiple things that are metabolically critical. It slows glucose absorption, flattening the insulin response to carbohydrate intake. It feeds the gut microbiome, which in turn produces short-chain fatty acids that regulate appetite hormones, including leptin and GLP-1. It increases the volume and water content of food, triggering stretch receptors in the stomach that signal satiety before caloric overconsumption has occurred. A diet built on whole tubers, whole fruit, fibrous plant material, and lean wild meat produces a completely different hormonal response from a diet built on refined grains, added sugar, and processed seed oils, even at identical caloric content. The fiber was not a health feature. It was structural. It was just what food was made of before processing removed it. Here's something else that almost never comes up. The specific sequence of movement before eating that characterized ancient forager life has metabolic consequences that no amount of post-meal exercise replicates. Ancient humans did not eat and then move. They moved and then ate. The hunt preceded the meal. The foraging preceded the harvest. The walking preceded the food. This sequence, sustained physical activity followed by food intake, creates a specific metabolic context. Muscle glycogen is depleted, insulin sensitivity in muscle tissue is at its peak, and the glucose from incoming food is directed preferentially into muscle glycogen replenishment rather than fat storage. John Hawley, at the Australian Catholic University, studying the metabolic effects of exercise timing in research published across multiple papers from 2011 to 2020, found that exercising before eating produces substantially better glucose disposal and fat oxidation outcomes than exercising after eating or not exercising at all. The body is most metabolically prepared to receive food immediately after it has used energy. Ancient humans were always in that state when food arrived. Modern humans almost never are they eat first, then sit, and the metabolic sequencing that evolution built for a world where food follows effort is running backwards. So here's the part nobody tells you. Ponzer's metabolic research on the Hadza, published in PLOS One in 2012, produced a finding that should have ended the simple calories in, calories out debate permanently. He measured total daily energy expenditure in Hadza adults using the doubly labeled water method, the gold standard for free-living metabolic measurement, and found that despite walking an average of 8 to 12 kilometers daily and engaging in physically demanding foraging activities, Hadza adults burned approximately the same total daily calories as sedentary Western adults of equivalent body mass. The body had compensated for the increased activity by reducing energy expenditure in other systems, inflammatory activity, immune baseline, hormonal production. The Hadza were lean not because they burned more calories. They were lean because their food arrived in a hormonal and metabolic context that directed it toward use rather than storage. The calories landed differently, not because of willpower or discipline or portion size, because of timing, composition, fiber content, and the specific sequence of movement and eating that the structure of forager life imposed automatically and that no modern diet plan has successfully replaced. A hunter somewhere in the Rift Valley ate an enormous quantity of meat last night because the hunt succeeded and the meat would spoil. He ate until he was full. He ate past full. He ate everything available because the behavioral logic of feast when possible is correct for a world where the next meal is uncertain. This morning, he is lean, moving across open ground, muscles fueled by overnight fat oxidation, insulin sensitivity high, gut microbiome fed by the fibrous tubers he'll find midday. He has no nutritional knowledge. He has never heard the word metabolism. He is simply living in a structure, light-bounded eating, movement before food, fiber-dense whole food, overnight fasting that his body was built for. That structure did not require discipline. It was the shape of the world. The world changed. The biology did not.